Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Digital Empathy Lounge brought to you by Anthralytics. Now, if you've not come across the Digital Empathy Lounge before, this is a podcast series exploring the best and next practices in experience management, and especially what great experiences should look like and feel like. Now, today I'm in conversation with Jeff Sheehan, who is an expert on customer experience management and author of the new book, The Customer Experience Management Field Book. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, good morning. How are you, Peter?
I'm great, thank you. So, Jeff, before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role and what prompted you to write the field manual?
Oh, wow, that's a lot. It's a lot in there. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate that. This is a great little collaboration, and I'm happy to be here. My background is really sort of two. I've sort of had two careers so far, maybe three by now. But my first was after university. I went into the U.S. Army. Um, and was an officer and helicopter pilot in the military for 10 years, which I loved. It was the adventure I had expected it and wanted it to be, and I did get to participate in a number of interesting events that I would say historical events. I was in Korea when the military government was replaced by its first civilian democracy. I was in Germany when the Berlin Wall came down, and those are pretty cool things to have as memories from work. But then I got into the customer services profession when I left the military and was hired by AT&T's computer business to be a field service manager. And what I loved about that job, which I did for a couple of years, I supervised 25 field engineer technicians who went out into data center environments to install and repair and configure and move and all that stuff. Big data center systems for computing and networking and storage. But I ran about a $50 million P&L, which had obviously 25 people, that had lots of customers, lots of contracts, lots of everything. And I was immersed in pretty much every facet of a customer service business in that job. And even the back office system. So I had a dispatch system that was connected to the contract system that was connected to the parts logistics system. So you could really understand how to achieve a first visit resolution by bringing the right skills to the right customer with the right parts at the right time to do a first visit resolution. And then there was a whole suite of metrics that we used. At the time, I was part of a company that had a data warehouse business. And so we used that data warehouse technology ourselves to look at our own operations, to look at customer satisfaction, and just all the different business facets of that customer service operation. And it was AT&T, so they were renowned for, and maybe still are, employee experience and customer delight. Customer delight was the first place I heard the words customer delight was at AT&T. So really, I was steeped in all those things that are it was customer service, but all those things that we today sort of associate with customer experience management. And then I went into sales. I was doing consultative sales work for a number of different sort of varieties. I was selling our total worldwide customer service infrastructure to other equipment manufacturers to be their sort of de facto service arm. I was selling managed services and business process outsourcing services, basically take on whole contact centers and help desks from a customer to do it for them. In some cases, acquiring the people and the stuff in their buildings to provide that service. In other cases, just sort of taking it over using our own organic resources. And then I got into management consulting because I wanted to get away from being so closely connected to hardware. There's something about the culture of a company that's focused on gear that service is sort of the attached secondary item and not the primary concern. But in management consulting, sort of advisory, you're really solving business problems, and oftentimes they're sort of they're very multidimensional, multifaceted business problems, and that really appealed to me. And you're dealing with business leaders who have a business imperative to solve those problems and achieve certain outcomes with. and they're very focused on getting something out of whatever it is you're going to do for them, whether that's improved top line, improved bottom line, etc. And then I did a total like side show with Apple. I went to work at an Apple store for about a year and a half, because I could and because I wanted to really see behind the curtain of how Apple, company I very much admire, whose my house is full of Apple products, but I really wanted to understand like what made them so good, and working in the organization allowed me to learn everything that I intended to. It was a great experience, that I still carry lessons over today from. And then I moved to Ireland, so that brought me to a new place to sort of rethink the nature of my work and what I wanted to do. And I decided CX was the best fit for me, and have opened up my own little customer experience management consulting um, business. I wanted to say firm, but that's too grand a word for for that. And then the quarantine came, and the little article I was writing for LinkedIn has morphed into a book. The book that you see behind me, which is just released in July. So that brings us right up to now, where I expect to soon to be working another role in the field of CX next month. But yeah, so I've got like 25 years of being in customer experience, customer engagement, delivery, sales, support roles, and really understanding how things work, what service is intended to do, but also being customer facing, really interacting with customers back and forth on the customer experience, either as a program or as an actual end user experience kind of model. So the other part of your question was about the book. Why did I write a book? It's a great question, because when I looked at when I first looked at the writing a book, I went to Amazon and I said, how many CX books are out there? And there's plenty. And then I asked myself, do I really want to write another one in a crowded field? And I obviously decided yes, I did, because the book I was looking for was really more of a practical, how do I build it? Like if I just parachuted into an organization and was told I'm the CX leader and there was nothing in place already, how would I get started? And I really didn't have that book that I was looking for. So that became the premise for writing my own book, which I hope is readers think, readers find it, read it, and believe that it is helpful in establishing a new program.
Great, thanks very much, Jeff. Yeah, and I think it's fair to say perhaps not the traditional background that one comes to expect with people who are in CX leadership roles, but obviously all of that has brought things and great experiences. And yeah, the book, firstly, thank you very much for allowing me to be an early reviewer. It was a great read, and I've certainly taken some things about it. And you're right, you and I have talked a lot about CX, and it's not new. Let's be honest, customer centricity has been around for centuries. It was really, I think, firstly, really espoused perhaps in the early part of the last century, but as a discipline, we've talked about it for about 25 years.
Yeah,
now, I'd
absolutely.
like to ask you a little bit more about one of the things you said. Lots is written about how you can run a voice of the customer program or how you should interpret or measure programs. But the point you raised was, where do you start? Because you've got all of these books. If you walk into any physical bookstore, it would be shelves and shelves of books on CX. So what do you think? As you say, you've been there, you've had to do it a couple of times. Where should you start with a new CX program?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it was one that I was stuck on. Really, it was really the genesis, the reason that I wanted to write this book, because so many. You're right. For the for the 25 plus years, I just summarized for you my background. Customer experience management was in place. It was doing a thing. I think what shifted was when the voice of the customer vendors took over the narrative and said, it's all about NPS, or it's all about surveys and so forth. And I think it's matured as a discipline, as a business discipline, to move away from just surveys and scores to now, like, let's be meaningful in terms of the revenue and the cost and the customer satisfaction components of a CX program. But where I would start if I had a blank sheet of paper in an organization to start is what I call in the book the define the mission. You know, what's the mission of the CX program? And there's a process I outline in the book called define, decide, and design your CX program. So, you know, for example, if you're an organization, if your business model values net new customers over loyal long-term customers, and we see that in many instances of the telco business or the insurance business where they're all about getting the net new and they're less concerned about the churn, or you're in a startup kind of mode as a new company, and you're all about acquiring new customers. There's nobody been around long enough to be loyal, so it's all about new. But that operating model is going to shape the kind of operation your CX program is. So, for example, if you're totally focused on customer loyalty or customer lifetime value in a company that values net new and doesn't value the long-term loyal customer, you're probably out of sync with your CX program, right? So really understanding the set of definitions for your organization, the decisions you want to make about what kind of approach to CX you want to take. Is it going to be reactive customer support done very well? Is it going to be predictive customer support done with a lot of technology? Is it going to be a highly personalized kind of a offering, as we see in a lot of luxury brands that really know their customer and the customer expects you to know that they've been a customer for a long time and things like that, or some combination of those things. But you really have to be conscious and intentional about what you're deciding. And then, of course, you can design the program from there. Once you know what the intended purpose is for your CX program, and it's not a one-size-fits-all proposition. So, you know, again, the book uses lots of frameworks where you can take them into your organization, use them within the boundaries of, you know, what you have, what you don't have, you know, whatever the realities are in the organization, and make it your own thing. But, you know, just to reiterate, begin with the end in mind and really think through the intentionality of a CX program to as a business function, not simply surveys and scores, because that ends up being the so what CX. All right, so great. I have an NPS of whatever.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And that's, I think, a really important lesson, that begin with the end in mind. You know, I sometimes paraphrase that as right-left thinking. So start on the right-hand side of the page about where you want to be and work backwards from there about to where you are. I think I would add to that, and I know that you touched this in the book as well, you need to benchmark, because how can you tell how much you've improved if you don't know where you are today and where you want to get to? And of course, that gives you the gap analysis. Now, you mentioned frameworks, and I think that your book is fantastic for the number of tools and frameworks that it includes. I guess that's what you would expect from a field manual. You know, lots of how-to, which is a really positive thing. You also touched on something else, and I just want to make sure I've got your understanding of this right. And, you know, it's, I think too many organizations start off with, let's just improve everything by 5%. And I do think a number of the measures that we've put in place are very operational, but that's not necessarily what customers value, is it? I mean, I think that, you know, what customers value is the experience. It's the, do you meet my expectations? And if you don't know what those are, then how can you deliver it? And it isn't always about get the highest satisfaction score or the fastest delivery on the planet. It's about what is the right mix. So I do think that, as I say, for me was an important thing. Every chapter contains really important tools. But there is one I'd like to explore with you a little bit more, because I like this. It was an adaptation of what I think it's called the Johari window, or Rumsfeld's window, if you like. You know, so
let's not quote him.
Got one of these 4-box models. But yours that I really liked was the value irritant matrix, which you introduced in the chapter about taking action. So could you tell us a little bit about that and how you use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a part, I want to say it's part 5 of the book, called Collecting Intelligence, basically the military metaphor for voice of the customer, customer understanding. And I break down the voice of the customer program, or that aspect of a overall CX program, into three component parts that are equally weighted. One is listening, the other is learning, and the third is action. And so if we all use those same rule of thumb, which is it's probably a lot more difficult to figure out what not to do than it is to figure out what to do. And that there's always a capacity boundary, right? We only have so many people with certain skills, so much time, so much budget, so much, and there's competition for all of that, right? So there's this CX isn't the only ongoing program in an organization that will need to use data, for example, and so forth. So so the value irritant matrix is really adopted from the book, The Best Service is No Service, where it helps you distill what you're understanding, what you're learning from your Voice of the Customer program into this matrix to decide what is the most value and the most irritating, and where you should focus on what to do. So if you're losing customers because they wait on the phone too long, and your business says, we're not going to hire more people in the contact center because that's really expensive, then that might lead you to understand root cause analysis for why are those calls coming in. In fact, the book, The Best Service is No Service, suggests something I truly believe in based on all my experiences. You should look at a service call or call into the contact center as symptomatic of a problem further upstream. That if the customer could get the help they needed, let's say, said another way, if the customer needs some help, it's because something failed, right? The expectation wasn't met. it was delivered broken. The produce I got at the grocery store expired the day after I brought it home, and all these little things, right? So if you really examine those calls and the root causes of those calls, you can get to some solutions further upstream, maybe in a design or a manufacturing process or a materials and supplier context, that remove the need for that call to ever be placed again. So the value irritant matrix is really a great way to see, where are maybe some quick wins that we can just get rid of things that we don't want to do, but customers want. And, let's turn that into FAQs and digital self-help, or things that we do that annoy customers because they don't value it. And let's take that off the table, so we're not spending money on doing things that annoy customers. Ultimately, it's about deciding as much about what not to do as it is about focusing on what to really do for that, what I call the aligned outcomes of it's good for the business, it's good for the customer. All right, so that's really where the value irritant matrix came in, and I loved it as a practical tool to structure your thinking and say, okay, now CX is oftentimes a collaborative business practice. So what you think is essential might be the thing I think is less essential. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if a CX leader can use the value irritant matrix to come up with one or two good things, things that have an agreement across a set of stakeholders to work on, then you've got a clear purpose with what that work can be and what the outcomes should look like and so forth. So that's what I liked about that in particular.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Let me see if I can tell you what I took away from reading that chapter about the value irritant matrix. I did like basically the four different models. So there's, what do we do that the customer really values? Let's do more of that, okay? Because that's what the customer wants. What do we do that the customer doesn't value? Can we minimize it? So can we reduce it, automate it, get rid of it? And then there's what we're not doing that the customer would really like. So we can explore that. We can say, okay, can we modify our service or our products so that we can address some of those unmet needs? And then, of course, there's the fourth case. What are we not doing that the customer doesn't want to do? Why on earth would we do that? So there's some very simple tools, I think, that organizations can do to take a good hard look at, is what we're doing adding value to the customer? Now, so of course, there are going to be cases where you have to do something the customer doesn't value, like you need to do the compliance statement at the start of a call. I understand that, and I think customers understand that too. but there are things that we think add value that the customer perhaps doesn't value. And there are opportunities perhaps where we can meet those unmet needs that the customer is expressing. Anyway, it was a great book. I really enjoyed reading it. I've got my copy. It's now on my top 10 list in my shelf of CX reading.
Thank you.
But Jeff,
that's great.
All that remains for me to do is say thanks very much for sharing some of your insights from the book. If people want to get a copy of it, there's a link in the comments. So that will take you straight to that well-known online vendor where you can get a copy. I heartily recommend it. It's a great read, full of practical hints and tips, not a lot of rehashing of what we already know as CX experts. But essentially that brings us to the end of this episode of the Digital Empathy Lounge. So I hope you enjoyed it, and please join us for other episodes. You can find out how to subscribe in the comments. And if you would like to take part or be a guest speaker, you can find out how to do that too. And with that, all that remains for me to say is thank you very much, Jeff, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Peter. Bye-bye.